Hey everybody, it's Rory from A&S Gear. We are looking at the brand new regulator from HK today. This is the Aerolite2. So I have the regulator here. It is not mounted onto a bottle or anything like that, but I've also brought up the older version of the Aerolite. So the Aerolite Pro Reg version 1, Pro Reg version 2 right here. So I just wanted to show you the difference between the two in case you were wondering what they were. Inside the box, you are going to get the Allen key to take it apart, plus one other shim to change your output pressure. But let's get inside of it and see what you're looking at. So I'm going to pull this one apart real quick so that we can look at the insides. I'm going to pull all the screws out. Just notice that I'm missing one screw on this one. I think I took it off on my bench a minute ago and forgot to bring it back. But that's all right. Let's get it apart and see where our differences are. So first things first, old regulator apart, or version 1, whatever you want to call it. All our screws are out of there. Let's pull the top off. And we're going to just set it like this. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's get the new one off. Talk about the new one. Pin valve, so same large pin valve style right there. This one is straight out of the box, and when you pick one of these up, obviously all these regs have been tested. So they are from the factory tested to make sure that they're holding air and functioning properly. So when you first get it, like I have this one right here, I can't push the pin down because there is a tiny, tiny little bit of air inside of there that is keeping the pin from being moved. If I take a Allen key, larger than that one, and I push the pin down, here it released all its air out of there, and now I can easily push the pin down. So there's just a little bit of leftover air from when they were testing it. Not enough to shoot a paintball, not enough to do anything crazy, not enough to blow apart and hurt you or anything like that, but just enough that it's going to hold the valve shut inside there. So just to give you a heads up, if you get one of these and you push on this, you're like, wow, that's stuck. Why is that like that? Well, that's why, right there. So let's remove these screws out as well and set them to the side. They are black now, unlike the other ones that were silver. The Aerolite2 right there. All right. So first thing, before I even get into the rest of it over here, get all of these out so that we can just look at the bottom and see the difference between the bottoms right here. Get all these shims out of here. So obviously this one is still in the regulator, or in the bottle right there. And then here's the new one right here. So this device right inside here, this silver piece from the original one, they really didn't tell you this, but you could turn this. You could rotate it around inside there if you put something like this inside here, and you could turn this. And what you could effectively do with this, it was threaded into the bottom, and by turning this, you could change the height that sat at, which would do the same thing that shims would do. Now by doing that, you could adjust the pressure output on there. They really didn't want you to do that. That's why they sold pressure kits and pressure springs and things like that to help adjust the pressure. But that's what the shimming would do. You could change where that sat inside there, and it does the same thing that the shim system does. It just adjusts where the piston, or not the piston, the spring sits inside there. And creates a different output pressure. So that's the major difference between the new one, the version 2, and that one, is they no longer have that twistable adjustment inside of them anymore. They are relying solely on a shim setup to control pressure outputs or to change pressure outputs. And that's what you get in that little kit we talked about. It was an extra shim. By adding the shim in, you're going to increase the pressure. By removing shims, you're going to decrease pressure. So that's that right there. So now moving away from the distribution block or the distribution body of the reg assembly here, let's go ahead and pull this out. So here is our bottom section, our piston and our spring. You can see that have a little bit longer spring in this one than you did in here. The spring, this is the pin valve spring right there. The main spring inside there, very different. Went away from this wave spring setup to a standard spring setup. And then our pistons, they look a little bit different too. Their height settings are a little bit different. The ball, the regulator, the reg seat at the end is a little bit different. O-rings look to be the same as far as sizing goes on those. And the overall shape of the piston is a little bit different. O-ring placement is slightly different if you look at it. If we line up the tops right there, the top O-rings, you can see that the O-ring on the new piston sits a little bit higher up than it does on the other one. But overall, same idea right there. All right. If we pop this open, pop this, you can see that these two pieces are the same. So there are threaded bonnet or threaded tops for the HK Pro regulators that you can replace the ones that came with it, like a stainless steel version. If you're concerned about the aluminum top being too soft, there is a stainless steel version that you can put on there, as well as other aluminum colors that you can put on there to boot. So that's it right there. That's your reg assembly between the two. Very similar regs. Obviously the spring setup is different. Length of our spring for our pin valve is different. Piston is different, but the idea behind them, very, very similar to each other. Let's go ahead and, well, you don't really need to see. I'll put this one back together real quick so you can see how it goes back together. I'm not going to put them all back together. We're going to put our upper piece back in stock, or back in stock. I say that a lot. So back inside. We want to make sure that that gets pushed all the way up and snaps into place, because when these top screws come through, you want to make sure that they go into this little channel right here. If you don't push it all the way up, it's possible that the screw, if you somehow got it together like that, would be up too high. But after you twist this all together, it's going to seat itself properly, so you really couldn't do that. But push it up in there, make sure that it's in the right spot. We're going to take our shims, put our shims back in. I'm going to take my piston, and I'm going to drop it down in there. Probably help if I put the spring in with it though. That would not work at all. So let's put that in. Then we can put our spring and pin valve in. Push that up through the top and twist that together. You can see it's very easy to service, very easy to maintenance. It's easy to understand. And that's one thing about paintball equipment or paintball stuff. Oh, you know what I forgot to tell? One of the whole reasons why there's two sets of screws on there, that was going to slip my mind and I wasn't going to tell you, because it still has the adjustable top as well. Let's say you have this and you screw it in to whatever gun you've got, and it ends up with the fill nipple or the gauge or something like digging into your arm, like digging into your wrist or whatever it happens to be. You can remove the top three screws and you can adjust the regulator how it sits. So you can, if you don't want it like this, now you can turn it so that it is out of the way and this is no longer poking you, and then you put the screws back in. Remember, as with any regulator setup like this, please make sure that it is not under pressure when you decide to disassemble or take it apart. That way you don't run into any issues with safety and having any problems. So let me just put the screws back into this real quick. There's only a couple left. Put that into here. We'll put the bottom ones in. Now, if you do need to adjust the top of the regulator or spin it like that, you don't need to remove the bottom set. You just need to remove the top set of screws. And then, as with any adjustment or any work that you've done, after you've put your screws in, please go back through and give them just a little bit of a snug. Especially with something like this, with a high pressure regulator, you want to make sure that everything is as well tight as it can be. Don't overdo it though. You don't need to Hercules out on these things and just crank them down. And that's that. That's how that goes together. Brand new HK Aerolite Pro Regulator, version 2, the Aerolite 2, available through ansgear.com.